Red Bull have clean swept the first half of the season, and a steamroll for Max Verstappen continues in Belgium. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast. This is episode 315. And if you'd like to see or hear more from us in your social feed, then why not give us a follow on our new social channels? We are on at Grid Talk UK, everywhere you can find the at symbol. I'm your host, Tom Horrox, and today I'm joined by the same teams we were yesterday in the Grid Talk co-host gang of Tom Downey.
Hello.
And Owain Medford.
Hello.
And now a word from today's sponsor. Again, it's betonline.ag. It is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL, hockey, right up to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to betonline.ag today. Be sure to use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I would say probably one of the lesser action-packed Belgian Grand Prix we've had, but still a decent race in the end. We saw some good overtakes all through the fields, a bit of action. But the big ticket item, I believe, has probably happened right at the start in La Source, is the collision between Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz. Tom, so I'm going to come to you for your opinion on this. Disappointing for both of them. What's your opinion on the collision, and should there have been a penalty?
Yes, there should have been a penalty. If we're going to penalise Hamilton for yesterday, then I can't see why today it's not penalised. I know you don't penalise the outcome, you penalise the incident. But the incident here was we had a driver who was out of control and blocked off another driver whilst out of control, causing them irreparable damage and also in turn ruining his own race. Why Ferrari didn't pit signs, why they actually tried to persevere with it, I will never know. They pitched them on lap 23. They should have pitched them on lap blinking 3. But there we are. More just I don't know, hashtag just Ferrari things. So, yeah, no, for me, yet again, it just highlights inconsistencies from the FIA. I felt for Piastri because he didn't do anything wrong. He braked early. He had left himself braking and thinking room because we all know how tight the pinch is into La Source. I did see someone online trying to blame it on Perez because Perez moved across quite aggressively, and I'm like, I thought to myself, A, get a grip, and B, I don't even think you would try and blame Perez for that one, Tom, although I suspect you'll give it a good go. So yeah, it was completely Sainz's fault. He was obviously getting flashbacks to Austin last year when Russell did the same thing to him, and then thought, do you know what, I can do that. I'll give it a go, and then he did exactly that, completely out of control. And yeah, it was 100% his fault. Piastri had every right to be where he was. He had made a better start, and it's just one of the things of Spa is that first turn, the racing line comes to the left, a driver to start on the right. It happens, but it was Sainz's fault.
Yeah, one thing I think we can all agree on. I think we all agree on that anyway. But even if we didn't agree on fault on Sainz, you can certainly say that Oscar Piastri was the innocent party, whatever happened. So no penalty, as it was in the end. It did end both of their races. Real shame for Piastri, but I'm sure he'll still look back on the weekend with positive vibes, given that he got his not podium but a second place finish in the sprint. But a team that did, however, will not be looking back at this weekend with any joy whatsoever is Haas. A long first stint for Hulk, Owain, and after starting from the pit lane, we saw him up in the points early, but again, quite an anonymous day from K-Mag. But there was just, again, no points whatsoever for Haas at all over this weekend, when we thought perhaps being a sprint, they might be able to get a couple of points from the sprint like last time out. I'm sure they're going to be looking forward to the summer break now.
Yeah. I just, as you say, they were in the points early on. But then I think, they decided to have an early lunch at Pirelli's. And it just, they just ate their tires. I mean, I think there was a shot that stuck out to me of I believe it was Magnussen. He was being passed by Joe at the time, I think, and he's leaving these big black 11s out of La Source. And maybe that's just a bit of him being a bit trigger happy on the throttle pedal. But yeah, no, but either way, we've seen the similar thing when the tires go off the cliff, and particularly when the teams had no idea how the drivers were going to perform. I think they just had a massive degradation, and obviously Hulkenberg started from the pit lane, and the only places he's gained were because of Sainz, so he can thank them for that. But apart from that, it was absolutely nothing to write home about, and they've got a month, but I honestly don't see much way of them turning this around. It's yet another lackluster performance from Haas.
And yes, another lackluster season, it seems, as well. Just last year, the only reprieve in recent years for Haas of having a decent season. But another team that will be disappointed and looking forward to the summer break, I think, although in recent races, their form has been on a bit of an upturn in Williams. And there were times today where Albon was at least flirting with the points. But in the end, P14 and P17, a bit of a disappointment for Williams, Tom?
Yeah, I think they could have expected more today, to be honest. We did kind of hype them up a bit yesterday, or certainly I did. Looking at sort of the tracks that car suits, or the characteristics of that car suits. You look at, your Monzas, your Silverstones, your Australias, your Austrias, that kind of thing. Sort of like medium to high speed corners, longer straights, that kind of thing. Yeah, Albon was very quick down the Camel Straight and on the run out the bus stop down to La Source, but as soon as he got into the middle sector, he was falling back like an absolute stone. He was running, I think, as high as about 8th or 9th at one point, but that was in the early stages. It became very apparent that the mediums were not lasting quite as long as some people thought. We saw more stints than I expected on the softs. I've seen Albon switch back to the softs, and then just ultimately he just didn't quite have the pace, and then Loki Bear much the same. He just sort of like fell backwards a bit. They'll take positives away from it. I think their one lap pace looked pretty decent, but their race pace today was not what they would have been hoping for, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. And another pointless weekend, but they still remain tied on points with Haas, I believe. No, they're ahead of Haas, aren't they? They are tied on points with Haas in 7th place with that better position finish from Albon, keeping them ahead. Alfa Romeo next up, and both stopping very early in the race, but Zhou did seem to have a bit of pace in that final stint, Owain, but finishing 10 seconds behind Bottas. He's shown good spells this year, I think, but is he under pressure in his sophomore year in Formula One, Zhou, in your opinion? And just how did Alfa get on today?
I wouldn't say he's under pressure. I don't think he's vastly underperforming Bottas, and Bottas has been there obviously quite a while. It's Zhou's second season in Formula One, so you would hope that he would be bedded in by now, and so that he'd be able to pull out regular performances. But I think there's maybe been a couple of times this year that he's outperformed Bottas in the race, but I couldn't say for certain when they were.
It's 8-4 in Bottas's favour in the race.
So he's not. In fairness, he's not exactly doing terribly there. The fact that he's outperformed, you'd have to look at individual circumstances there, I think. But they finished sort of 2 by 2, which is more than can be said for a number of other teams. 10 seconds away probably is a little much, but I think they had a fairly decent race. I mean, this is probably one of their highest average finishes, I think. So I can't level any massive criticisms at them. If anything, I think it's one of their better performances. So as much as it's an uptick in form, I don't think we're going to see this continue unless they pull a blinder out for the second half of the season. But yeah, it's okay. I just think it's just okay.
Yeah, I think upgrades definitely needed for Alfa Romeo in the second half of the season to try and pull themselves a little bit clear, but seem to be on a bit of a downward spiral. But one team who did, hurrah, they scored a point. It's AlphaTauri up next, Tom, and one race, Yuki on average is getting a P10 1 in 4 races. He's got 3 so far this year. Somewhat lackluster race for Daniel Ricciardo, though. Stuck in traffic, stuck in a DRS train, going backwards. Strange pit stop strategy. Seemed to be it just seemed to be constantly being overtaken by people. Bit of a Jekyll and Hyde performance from those two today.
Yeah, bring back Nick de Vries, I say. No, it was it was a. I wonder if Danny Rick had contact early on because he had pitted very early, and I gotta be honest, I didn't see where he pitted, but I know he pitted early because I remember looking at it and thinking, oh, hang on, he went up from P19, then he was back in P19, so that kind of whenever he did pit, that kind of curtailed his race. But the Sonoda hype train is back. There we had lap 6, thank you. Was when Danny Rick pitted. But yeah, Sonoda, blinking heck, where did that come from? People were saying with Danny Rick coming in, it's either going to be that Sonoda has to up his game or he's going to be out. Well, it looks like he's upped his game because that was a hell of a performance today. Strategy obviously helped, but we know that AlphaTauri is not particularly quick. In dry conditions where all the teams had very limited running, as we saw, it was a performance for the ages for Tsunoda. I voted him for my driver of the day because in that AlphaTauri, to get that result out of that car, blinking well done, Yuki. And this is where Yuki's got a bit of the sort of like Lance shoulder about him. It's like, keep getting these kind of results, where you sort of just fly under the radar and then people go, oh, hang on a minute, you ended up with a point in the worst car on the grid kind of thing. Like when Stroll got a pole in 2020. And it's like, keep that going and you're doing the right thing and you'll people will talk good. It's when he does the stupid things, like the silly accidents and this and that and just spins and all the rest of it, which he still needs to cut out. And we're saying that after 3 years or 2.5 years. So, if Yuki can just have more weekends like this, he'll be all right. But we do still need to see more. We need to see consistency. Never mind more consistency. We need consistency full stop from him.
Yeah, it was just a very, very odd performance overall. And I've been a big supporter of Yuki Tsunoda this season. I thought he's been driving very, very well. I was a little worried that it was just that the yardstick was so low, but it's shown that it's clearly, Daniel Ricciardo is no slouch, but he can go missing in races as well. So we've got a very small sample set at the moment. These 2 races were always going to be just get to the summer break and then see what happens after. So second half of the season, let's see what Tsunoda can do up against a revitalized, rested Daniel Ricciardo, who's back in the groove. But I'm looking forward to seeing that because I think that's going to give AlphaTauri something to be interesting about in the second half of the season. But a team next up has been through the ringer this weekend, especially with multiple sackings and people leaving by mutual consent. But it seemed like a better weekend for Alpine, and despite McLaren's woes, they've still lost ground in that fight for P5. But we saw some great overtaking from Ocon and Gasly, but in the end, just that 1 points position for Gasly. What are they going to do the second half of the season? Are they going to try and develop, or are they now going to have to focus on 24?
I think it's focus on 24. I don't think there's anything that they can get, unless McLaren is going to have shockers for the next 10 races. I don't think there's going to be. There's not a massive chance of them catching up to McLaren. As we've said, all I can say is, where the hell has this been? It was really great to see that, Ocon did a masterful job getting up to 8th place. He started 14th on the grid, and he's done an absolutely brilliant job with I think it's strategy that's got them there. But absolutely brilliant. Gasly was not far off, being in the points as well. As you say, the overtakes they were pulling, they're probably tyre performance related, but it didn't matter. They were still sending it around the outside of places that I wouldn't want to be. The standard of racing at them is, I don't know how they've, it's like having a different different set of drivers. So they don't lose that in the next in the next 4 weeks, because if they can come back and if they can keep bringing that more consistently, ironically enough, we probably wouldn't be having the issues that Alpine are currently facing with having to make massive personnel changes. I mean, it's come at they've chosen a good sort of break point, I guess, to do them. But I think it's a case of knuckle down over these from now onwards, get the car sorted, and make sure your drivers are bringing that level of performance. Do whatever you can to repeat this, because it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, you just optimize your performance, optimize your package and your drivers, and just get the most of what you can for each weekend. That I think should be the target for the rest of the season, and then focus fully on next season. But we'll see what they do. I mean, whoever's steering that ship at the moment, I don't know, but it's been listing for a while, so hopefully it can get some form of direction for the second half of the season and have a bit of competitiveness in that midfield. But Aston Martin up next, Tom, and a P9 for Stroll and a strong P5 for Alonso, though not quite the heights of the P2s and P3s that we had earlier in the season. Is this an important weekend for Aston Martin? Because they seem to have stemmed the flow a little bit.
Yeah, because the Alonso hype train is definitely in for major repairs at the minute, especially after he went out in the sprint. But he's it's a good result for Aston Martin. But given all the hype at the start of the season, where people were saying, are they going to be the first team to take a win? We thought maybe was Alonso going to take a pole position off him in Monaco, and that kind of thing. That's not going to happen now. Hamilton's only a point behind Alonso in the constructors in the drivers for third. Mercedes are sitting nicely in P2 in the constructors. What they call Aston Martin's real battle is with Ferrari and McLaren for P4, really, you could say. And they're sort of hanging on to that one with only one hand, because Stroll is like a kettlebell that's sellotaped to their behind, that's pulling them down. That's a weird analogy. But it's just they've sort of plateaued a bit, and apparently the changing compounds that came in I want to say Silverstone apparently haven't helped. Also, apparently upgrades that Aston Martin have brought in since the start of the season. I heard, I think on Sky, that they've counteracted some of the oversteeriness of the car, but it has made the car inherently understeery, which may sort of good to show why it's a bit slower in the corners and just sort of off the pace a bit. Also, I think the rivals are definitely catching up. I wonder if Aston have got one eye on next year by now, because I think they've realised that they're sort of like roughly where they're going to be, and ultimately, if they get P3 in the constructors, they still get more wins on all the time than if they were to be P2. So yeah, they're sort of in like a weird. They're sort of like in a weird like no man's land at the minute, and it's very much the opposite of what Team Silverstone used to be. Obviously it's by the base. So if you look back, their Force India Racing Point days, they always overachieved, and now if anything, I think you could say they're possibly underachieving a bit.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to the second half of the season for them. I think they're going to be. They need to bring up updates and try and get back in that fight, because at the moment it's just like you say, hanging on to fourth is probably the what the target is going to be. But you never know with Ferrari, they could well shoot themselves in the foot. But they certainly seem to be the team in the ascendancy for that position at the moment. But we're going to talk about Lando Norris now, Owain. And somehow, on lap 12, if you'd have told me that Lando Norris would be securing P7 despite 2 early pit stops and having absolutely no pace on those durable tyres, I would never have believed you. I was fully expecting that he was going to fit 4, potentially 5 different compounds of tyre throughout the race, given when the rain was coming down, he'd already fitted all 3 dry sets. But those tyres he kept on till the end of the race, 27 laps on soft. So really the question is, was this race damage limitation for McLaren, or was it a poorly executed weekend rescued by Lando Norris?
I don't. I've completely forgotten the result of the sprint, but I don't think it was that bad for the McLarens. Oh, they did a fairly decent job, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I can't believe I forgot about a P2 for
P2
Piastri.
for Oscar, yeah, but
Yeah,
then
I mean,
was slightly further back.
the less said about the race result, sorry, the Grand Prix result for him, the better. Obviously, he's basically not. He's the innocent party there, so there's nothing more that can be done. And I think he did as well as he could to get the car stopped in a decent place, so we didn't even have to throw a full safety car. But as you say, coming back to Norris, I think the first half of the race, it was absolutely diabolical. They just couldn't get the tyres to fire it to work. I don't know. They'll have to investigate that because that's worrying that nothing was working on those first two tyres. He just had absolutely no pace on the mediums, and the hards proved not much better. They just kind of he sort of floated about. It was really when the rain came. What little rain we had, and putting on those softs, and honestly doing a really good job because the deck looked so high, particularly with drivers coming in on lap 7, to change those. I think they've the McLaren team have done a really good job there, actually, in the strategy at least, to just go, right, this isn't working, we'll put something else on. And they've made the best of it, and clearly it was an amazing decision because obviously the medium runners there had significantly less grip, and we were just able to see some masterful driving from Norris to get back to where he probably should have been all race. It's unfortunately that means you kind of think, oh well, what could he have done if he'd started on softs? So yeah, I think it's a good weekend overall.
Yeah, I think definitely a damage limitation exercise there, but like you say, it does make you wonder if he'd have started on softs or if he'd have changed to the softs on lap 5 and then did another soft run later on in the race, fresher tyres instead of hanging on at the end. Maybe he could have been a bit further up, but I suspect potentially P7 was realistically the best that he could have hoped for, given that's where he started as well. But moving on to Mercedes, then another good recovery from George Russell, starting back a little bit further back and then climbing up to P6. Pretty bad weekend overall in context for him, but decent recovery. And Hamilton didn't quite have the pace for a podium. Second looking pretty likely for him. How do you rate the weekend for them, Tom? Is it it's very underwhelming, I would say, unspectacular.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one for Mercedes, because quali they didn't do great, and then obviously we talked about everything in the sprint yesterday. Today it was just it was a bit it was just sort of like odd for them. They couldn't really take the fight to whoever was in front. Look at Hamilton especially, he couldn't really take the fight to Leclerc. But also, Alonso was so far back, he was able to pit, on the end of lap 42 or whatever lap it was, to then take the fastest lap on the last lap, even on a set of mediums. So it was odd, in that sense. But the damage was sort of done in quali because we knew the Red Bull were going to be that far out the front. And it was just going to be a case of whoever was starting on pole, with Max's penalty, that they were going to be the sort of best of the rest, because we knew the Red Bull were going to be at the front. The only question was, were we going to have one or two of the Formula 1.25 cars on the podium? Because it would depend what Perez. But Perez, for once, didn't actually completely bottle it, I do wonder if had it been one of the Mercs who started on pole, especially if it was Russell, maybe they'd have held the lead a bit longer from Perez, because we'll get into that in a minute. But I thought Leclerc sort of rolled over a bit and let let Perez through. I digress from Mercedes. I hope that sort of reference makes sense. Yeah, and then Russell worked his way back up through the field because he committed to a 2-stop. Did a good initial stint, but yeah, it was just a bit of a if they wanted to sort of really get a firm grasp on P2 in the constructors. With the sort of damage control that Aston Martin did today, they need a better weekend than that. And I do wonder if, I was going to say next week, but God, we've got over a month now until the next race. I do wonder if in September they're going to struggle in Monza. I wonder if Mercedes might really struggle then, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Frankenstein car, as it's been described. Just various different concepts all thrown together. So I think they're just trying to make the best of a bad car until the end of the year and see where they end up. But certainly seems to be doing okay, and that's just a weird thing to describe Mercedes as okay. We're not used to that at all. But we'll move on to what Tom was touching on, Owain, with Charles Leclerc. He gets a podium for Ferrari today. The only non-Red Bull car to be anywhere near the front there. Certainly looked to be a stronger weekend. 5 points off Aston Martin now, and 50 points off Alonso in the championship load. Leclerc. So can Leclerc move forwards from this? Can they have a better second half of the season?
I think so. They seem to be becoming, being, sort of on the ascent in terms of their performances. I kind of don't know how to characterize it as a performance really from Leclerc, because obviously, he was on pole, but he was on pole because as a result of Verstappen being having that grid penalty. But he still obviously did enough to get a second place start. Second place in qualifying, which then obviously gave him the pole in the race. And then it was almost inevitable that he was going to be overtaken by Perez, just due to the straight line speed of the Red Bull. And it seemed that they had a decent amount of pace. At times he could keep on top of Hamilton as well. Which seemed decent enough. But yeah, I don't know how, but I'm disappointed in what he's done. Maybe it's just because Perez was uncharacteristically not shit. Sorry, not bad. I'm somehow disappointed, but it is objectively a better performance than normal. So, they got to keep this going, but I think for me, it's the minimum that's acceptable for Ferrari. They should always be getting at least podiums, and it was a decent drive from Leclerc, and it was because they got rid of the mess ups that they normally have. I think the biggest thing is if they get rid of the takeaway is if they can string together, not hampering themselves, they can pull up relatively decent performances, and I think that's what they've got to obviously being aiming for. So there is still life at Ferrari. I'm still somewhat underwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I think maybe if that was a P3 and a P4, we'd probably be having a different conversation about Ferrari. And it's just a fact, it's just a one car up there fighting because Sainz decided to biff off a McLaren on turn one. But we'll move on then to the Red Bulls then. So, I mean, what more can be said? 12 in a row this year, clean sweep for the first half of the season. Max coming through the field, just 32 seconds ahead of Perez for the first non-Red Bull runner, and Perez still half a second a lap slower on average, even if you take out the fact that Max started the race later than Perez, given his grid position. I'm going to come to both of you on this, but I'll come to you first, Tom. Just anything that hasn't been said about Red Bull so far?
Not really. They're just utterly dominant at the minute. And, as a Red Bull fan, I wouldn't mind a DNF or two for Max so that we can see Perez having a scrap with someone and maybe see a different winner. I've got to be honest, I'm getting quite bored of the Dutch national anthem now. I turned off the podium ceremony even before it had happened. So I want to see someone else win. Part of me wants to see a complete season clean sweep because that would be right in the history books. But I completely get why people will, say, "Oh, you're falling for the sport," all the rest of it. But I'll just put it this way: this is how worse, non-Merc fans felt from 2017 to 2020, especially 2020 when it looked like Merc were going to wipe everything. So what goes around comes around. But also, when a team gets this high up, there's only one way they can go, and that is down, and the onus is on the other teams to catch up.
Yeah, you can't blame Red Bull for being better than everyone else. Absolutely. And the fact they've done this as well with a reduced wind tunnel time as well. So it's even if you take out the fact that the cost cap breach and that they still had less because they were champions in 22. So they've done an absolutely phenomenal job, and it is absolutely on the other guys to catch up. So, Owain, Tom didn't mention much about Perez's performance there, so I'll come to you to stick the knife in if you want to, or indeed give praise. You said earlier that he was not terrible, should we say? But again, as I said, just still to finish a pit stop behind your teammate when you started 5 places ahead, for me, that's not good enough. Is it good enough?
I apologise for the use of language there, but I think it signifies my depth of feeling about Perez a lot of the time. This is a uncharacteristically good performance from Perez, bearing in mind he started second on the grid and clearly the fastest car. Got past almost immediately, and we saw that. I know that they're managing their tyres. I know that they're managing their tyres, particularly at the start of the race compared to the second half of the race, and that he would have had over 80 kilos more fuel than Verstappen did when Verstappen was having it out with Gianpiero Lambiase, his race engineer. But for me, it always comes back to, we've said it before at the start, earlier parts of the season, when Perez when Perez is out front. I know it might not be his style or the way he likes to, or the way he races, and clearly it's still okay for him in that he's finished second, but he doesn't have the ability like Max to just pull away. And now maybe that's just the depth of his talent, and he's that's the maximum he can do. But Max Verstappen is clearly 3-time world championship material, and we saw that just blowing the rest of the field away over the rest of the race. As you say, pulling out half a second a lap on Perez on average, even with a 6th place start. And it's brought it's more of the same. It's just continuing in the form that he's had, and it's meant that he's now on the cusp of. I didn't really talk about this, but on the Vettel era, back in the previous era of Red Bull dominance. There's law of diminishing returns there, so don't worry. It will when the regulations stay stable, gradually it will come back together, and that's going to happen even faster with the cost cap and the reduction in aero time. But he's now on 8 straight wins in a single season, and that is going to. I can't see him, coming back from the break and not extending it to 10. So like I say, I know I've gone a bit long with this, but it's a brilliant performance by them, and they're doing a great job. At smashing records in the way that every other previously dominant team has, and for them, obviously, long may it continue. But it'd be nice to see something else, but the racing was great. So what can we say?
Yeah, no, echo that 100%. No, all not much more you can say about Red Bull. The plaudits are plentiful and will remain so in the second half of the season, I'm sure. So, Tom, we'll come on to you. What is your driver of the day for today?
I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to say Yuki Tsunoda, because he was, to get 8 points in the AlphaTauri, and he lost a couple of places sort of late on, kind of thing. That that AlphaTauri is rough, and he did more than what more than what he needed to get to get a point, and a fully deserved point. So absolutely Yuki, my driver of the day.
Yeah, it's nice to give it to someone down on the bottom end of points for a change. Owain, your choice?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I thought Ocon did an absolutely outstanding job to go from, as I say, he started 14th on the grid, and then obviously picked up some vital points for Alpine. It was so much better than anything he's done previously. Long may that continue.
Yeah, I think for me it'd be difficult not to give it to Max Verstappen, but I'm kind of I think I will go with Max Verstappen, just given that that stint on the second set of tires on those medium tires was just phenomenal. He had so much pace early on, and despite taking a lot of life out of them, kept them going to the end. But a definite honourable mention, given that he did nothing wrong in his race and yet still managed to drag those tyres out and get a brilliant points finish, as Lando Norris for P7. I think that deserves. If he'd have made a mistake and ended up at the back and then recovered to 7th, then absolutely I wouldn't have said that. But it's nothing he's done. It's the team's decision to run that much downforce, and which made him a sitting duck in the straights. So no dry running at all up until the race, effectively. So managed very, very well from him. So honourable mention. But if you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of those listeners that are not subscribed to the channel, why not subscribe now to ensure you never miss a show again? And don't forget to click the bell on YouTube to know when we're going live. We've got over 2,000 subscribers now, so thank you for your support. And please consider sharing us with a friend to let them know what we do. But speaking of that, is there anything that you would like to share, Tom? Anything you'd like to plug?
Go listen to Formula Talk. You can get it everywhere. You get Grid Talk. I said the same thing yesterday. So yeah, go listen to that. It's lit, as the kids say.
I've never heard you say that, and I never want to hear you say it again.
And I never will say it again.
Fantastic. Owain, anything you would like to plug?
I'd like not using the word lit. I think the kids have stopped saying that.
I am fully behind this. Absolutely.
That's so 2020.
Yeah. Oh God, just so 2020, Tom. Yeah. And if you want to follow me, I'm at Tom Horrox F1, and I'm on the Monkey Seat podcast as well, which is available in all the same places as Grid Talk. But lastly, before we go, all of us at Grid Talk would like to extend our gratitude to our founder, Jared, who is stepping away from Grid Talk after this weekend. He won't be drawn on his plans, but we believe that he's taking up the vacant role at Alpine. And Jared, if that is the case, let me be the first to say that we are very sorry, and our deepest sympathies go out to you. None of us involved on this podcast would be here without your contribution. You've brought so many like-minded people together from literally every corner of the globe, and you deserve to be incredibly proud of what you've created. So please don't be a stranger. We will miss you. But that's it for us for today. But we will continue, even despite our founder, Jared, leaving us. But all our race shows do go out live on YouTube straight after the event, and our audio version will go up slightly later, which is available on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. And we also run a Patreon. So if you want to help us continue doing what we're doing, please consider donating to us. Everything that you donate does go back into the show. We will be back at some point in the summer break, I'm sure, for our mid-season driver review. So tune into that to hear me bagging on Perez. But in the meantime, we have a lovely summer, and we will see you soon. Goodbye. Cool. So we're going to do a post show because we've got a few questions in there, and there was a few that were right close to my heart and then ripped my heart out. So we'll start here with a soliloquy. We need to do something about Perez. He's killing the competition with such mediocre riding. But then followed up by saying Carlos saved Lando, else Piastri would have exposed him. So let's unpick that then. What's your thoughts? Perez, is he killing the competition with mediocre racing?
No. What do you want about? I'm not saying he's gonna. I'm not saying he's wiping the floor or anything. But he's going against Max, who is in the best form of his life. And in the car that he is actually at one with. So it's like when you had. The likes of Rubens to Schumacher or Bottas to Hamilton, or even to a point, Mark Webber in his later years to Seb. He's Perez today has done exactly what Red Bull needs him to do. He was started on the front row. Excuse me. He took the race win. Oh, sorry, no, he didn't. What am I about? He took you'd be in a sombrero if he did. He took the race lead, I should say. Sorry, I got hiccups as well. And then when Max was coming through, Checo knew that his race wasn't with Max, and any time spent trying to defend against Max would have been in vain, because all he would have done would have been burnt up his tyres and then been susceptible to Leclerc or whoever in P3. Perez did everything he could today. He did everything right. You could argue maybe he should have taken the lead at La Source, but it's such a short run. I thought Perez put in a very good move on Leclerc, almost got him napping a bit to take the lead. I do. Ever since Miami, Perez has had his confidence rocked a bit. And then also crashing out in Monaco, that really didn't help. And then the whole Austria thing, getting knocked out in Q1 or Q2, whatever it was, with track limits, all the rest of it. But Hungary last week, qualifying's never been his strongest area anyway. But he's done what Red Bull need him to do. And, I think he can now go into the summer break, just have a bit of a reset. He can go in knowing that he's got back-to-back podiums, and that he's just picking up that form again. Every driver has dips in their form.
Yeah, so for me, my feelings are on Perez and that. It depends on his attitude. If he's going with the attitude of, Max is going to beat me every time, so I'm just here to score a lot of points and get the odd win, then that's fine. But he does need to pick up his pace, though, because next season, that pace will probably be a P5, P6, because it's only because everyone else is in these Frankenstein cars or not got the correct concept or, still recovering. I don't think it's going to be enough. So he does need to get better. But I agree that as long as he's coming home second or third, he's doing enough. But his performances next year, if they're the same level they are this year, Red Bull aren't winning the Constructors' Championship. I'm absolutely convinced of that, because I'm convinced people will be a lot closer. But that's just my thoughts on it. But there we go. As for the Lando bashing, get me started on this. So Piastri, obviously phenomenal talent, but if you look at his performances in the races, I think his race management is nowhere near the level of Lando yet. I think on a single lap, Lando is one of the best qualifiers out there, and Piastri is absolutely on his level, which is a huge asset for McLaren. But Piastri's race management is not quite there yet. So I don't think he's going to show Lando up. I do think there will be races when he'll beat Lando, but I don't think he's on the same level as Lando just yet. But he's given it, he's younger, that lineup is potentially going to be one of the best, if not the best lineup in Formula One in the coming years. What do you guys think?
Well, it's easy to be fast. There's loads of fast drivers out there. Like this was the thing about Romain Grosjean when he joined the sport, is that it's easy to be fast. They get there by being fast. Maybe at the expense of race management, because you don't in F2 and F3. You're not the maximum you do is an hour. Obviously, the race today was an hour and a half. An hour and 22 minutes, but. The pressure is so much higher. You've got the car differential between the different teams and all that to deal with as well. And you see it time and time again, is that these rookies come in and they're very, very good and they're very, very fast. Quick over one lap, but it is knowing how to maintain that and deal with the wheel-to-wheel action and manage that whole thing over a race distance that is always to be desired. And you need to mess up. You need to, I don't know, go to Russia, not listen to your team, not pit for intermediates, and have a very, very bad time. Like, that has to be done. But it's something that comes with age. You'll see Piastri make that mistake once or twice, and then it will go away. Whereas I think lesser drivers, you'll see those. You see them make that mistake time and time again. So I think it's, he's got the speed, which is something you can't teach, and you can teach race management. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. But I think Norris probably would have had the edge.
Yeah, I agree. And also looking through the chat here, we've got lots of comments from Jared, just like whooping and cheering for our, as Jared Bradley, not Jared Partridge, just whooping and cheering for our comments in general. We won't touch any more on Max and Perez. I think we've done that one to death now, but some good points made in the chat there. Leon, that's Max Verstappen again. We'll probably skip over that again. What's going to happen to Omar Schaffner, Leon? He says he's staying while the team says he quit. No, I think that was a spoof tweet.
That was a spoof of the Piastri one, yeah.
No, and then there was I'm pretty sure that was, and there was another. I think there was a fake tweet put out there as well saying that there was nothing to do with it, which someone on our panel, not today, but on our group did fall for. But no giving away who that was. But tune into the monkey seat if you want to find out who it was, because I'm going to be ripping him for that. Yes. Another question. Apparently, cost cap is being breached by Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston Martin because of the side project supercars they run. Should they be penalised more severe? I'd like to just caveat this. FIA have confirmed that they have not finished their accounting yet, and there's no way of knowing if anyone's broken the cost cap yet. I think it's some people putting some rumours out there because it's kind of getting to that time of year. So I think if that is the case, which it does say at the moment that we have no confirmation of anything like that, then if they have been hiding things in their supercar programs which are then relevant to Formula One, then absolutely they need to be punished heavily and harshly. And I say that even if that was the case for McLaren supercar project, then I would say exactly the same thing. Even being a McLaren fan, creative accounting should not be a factor in the Formula One World Championship. What's your thoughts, guys?
Well, I don't think that's the case. It's not. But, right, but in the sector I work in, I know people who work for these things. Half the reason that they have half the reason that supercar projects exist is is partially to move people across. So the AMG One stuff from Mercedes, that they moved across people to do that. Ferrari, I know Ferrari, I mentioned Ferrari, but Ferrari moved people across to their WEC hypercar projects, and obviously Red Bull and Aston Martin have their own thing, have their own things with the RB17 and the Valkyrie, but those are specifically because it wouldn't be stemming from that. It's not like the hypercar doesn't come in. It's closely related, but it's not. It's very clearly, it'll be clearly a separate entity. So they move engineers across so they don't breach the budget cap. That's actually partially the reason that those projects are running in at all. As Tom says, if it's creative accounting, then sure, the full weight of the FIA should come down on them. But I don't think it's not as a case of the hypercar projects being included within the F1 budget. That's completely different. It's part of the reason that Mercedes do have a little bit of an advantage in that high performance powertrains are, I think, technically a separate company.
Yeah, and there was I know there were a couple of rumours out earlier in the week where Helmut Marko said that he had a contract with Red Bull until 2025 and he intends to honour it. And then nowhere in the accounting does it mention anything about a Helmut Marko contract. So should he be included in the cost cap if he has a Red Bull contract? And again, all rumours. So it may well be that he has a contract with Red Bull Entertainments or something along those lines. So I think it's very difficult to say. But we'll close off with the last thing. Really, is still about the cost cap, but more about the punishments. And you're saying about the FIA coming down on them with all the weight. It seems like the weight is a bit of a feather, though, at the moment, based on what we've seen. But some good points made. FIA seem to make it clear that there is not really a cost cap. Red Bull flouted the rules and weren't penalised as long as entertained Saudis. They don't care. Quite strong words. Not entirely convinced on that, but I'll let you guys discuss that. And just to close it off, Leon says, I think it would if it had been close and the winter on time would have mattered, but Red Bull are so far ahead that it doesn't really make a difference effectively. So yeah, over to you guys on that before we close off.
Oh, hang on, I just want to address that comment about what was that comment about the Saudis?
As long as they entertain the Saudis, they don't care. That was what Jared said.
No, I disagree with that because Red Bull aren't owned by the Saudis for a start. They're owned by.
They pump a lot of money in. I think that's more what he was.
Okay, but it's it's just I inherently disagree with that. And Red Bull did get they did have they did have punishments last year. Did the punishment fit the crime? You could argue it didn't, and I know a lot of people feel that way. They still had a reduction in wind tunnel time, and it was partly down to an error. It wasn't they had intentionally overspent. But I think, putting last year behind us, I think what we need to say here is there's no basis for any of this so far this year. And at the minute, it's all pure speculation. It's just, it's just, just people just, sort of, saying, oh, it's this team and that team. It's like I heard that Alpine had overspent, but then Le Quipe, which is the French magazine, conveniently left out Alpine in their rumored reportings. I've heard Mercedes. I've heard almost every team in there, and I've heard that it's a group of 4 teams. So it's there's no basis to any of this. If it comes out that a team has overspent, and I don't think it'll be in what somebody in chat said about moving people from the supercar, hiding supercar development, for the F1. If anything, it's like Owain said, it's the other way around. It's the F1 development stuff then gets passed over to the supercar stuff, because that's why we see hybrid systems that have been developed in F1 are now going into road cars, whether it's supercars or whether it trickles down. It's like if you look at, especially when Audi come in, they're going to have some trickle down development into their sort of more everyday road cars, which they'll filter into things like the VAG group in general. So, no, I don't think it's that, and it's I think also people are perhaps getting a bit too, and when I say, but I don't mean people in the chat, by the way. I just mean a lot of the chatter that you see online in general around F1. Just to be clear, we do see a lot of people still talking about the fallout or potential fallout of the budget cap from last year, all the rest of it. Red Bull have still worked around a deficiency in wind tunnel time. What people forget is they've got Adrian Newey at the helm, a man who had designed so many ground force effect cars and had won 100 races before he even came to Red Bull. There's then one, and then I think it was as of the Canadian Grand Prix, he'd won 100 races with Red Bull. So so he's on 206, 207 races. I can't quite remember.
Red Bull's 100th was Newey's 200th.
Yeah, so and Canada was 6 races ago, I think.
Something like that.
So yeah, something like that. So it's it's just I do think some people need to give it a rest, and the other teams are going to catch up because because this is where we're going to start to see the new-ish rules of less aero time and all the rest of it. The higher up you finish, it's beginning to take effect. We've seen it with Williams, for example. Because obviously they finished so far down the grid. They've had more wind tunnel time. They sort of restructured. Then it's these kind of things don't fix themselves overnight. And with these sort of like new mitigating sort of like after effects, if like with these put in place, they will take a couple of years to kick in. So it's not going to happen straight away.
No, that's a fair point. My only said at the time, my only disagreement with the punishment to last year was I thought that Aston Martin got away pretty scot-free, and that Red Bull potentially the fine I thought should have then come off the budget cap as well, because then because if you reduce the wind tunnel time, wind tunnel's expensive, so that means they've got more money to spend elsewhere. So if they'd have reduced the wind tunnel time, and then the money that would have been spent on wind tunnel time gets removed from the cost cap as well, that for me would have been enough. But that was my only disagreement in that. But that's just one person's opinion. I don't work for the FIA, despite everyone saying Tom from the FIA says this. It's not me, I promise. So I'm just that's my only thing with that. It's just my opinion. I thought it's slightly undercooked, but was still a decent hefty penalty. So. But if anyone, I say this, and I would say this for McLaren, for Mercedes, for Williams, for anyone, if there's multiple breaches of the cost cap, it needs to be higher, because you can make a mistake once, especially when there's infancy of the rules. But if there's continual mistakes, then it does needs to be progressively more. But there we go. Any more points on that before we close everything down?
No, nothing
for a month.
Not really. I think you've pretty comprehensively got all of it.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for all your comments today as well, everyone. Really appreciate your support, and we'll see you all in a month, if not before, for our mid-season ratings, and if we arrange anything else anytime soon. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. See you in a month.